Have you ever been being disappointed? Excessive rainfall in June and July, which rarely occurs here in Tennessee, contributed to a bumper crop of potatoes and onions and other early crops. But beans act funny with too much rain. Everything looked fine. We dutifully hoed them out and the vines grew great, and then they began blooming. They just didn't make any beans. The same thing often happens with tomatoes. If you over-fertilize them, they make vine after vine, but don't make much fruit. We have to be careful with nitrogen when we fertilize. That's why we use compost. Why do plants make seeds? To further propagate their species. Every time it rains, nitrogen is released in the soil. And if the nitrogen keeps flowing, the plants just keep growing and see no reason to make their fruit. What happened this spring is that we had all this rain, the vines looked great, they were blooming, but they just didn't make very many beans. Well, I knew from past experience that when there's too much rain in the spring, that rain soaks into our soils and allows for planting a fall crop of beans, which is what this is over here. In late July, we cleaned up the old potato field and got them all put away, and I decided I would use this field to plant the fall beans. So we made some furrows. Of course, I do this with a tractor, but in the garden we'll just use a hoe. And we simply make a furrow in some good soil. The soil has to be in good heart, good tilth and all. And then I take the seeds and I drop them, about 2 to every foot and step on them. I love to firm the seed into the soil. That way I get a good contact and that seed will swell up because it's got the soil right up against it. Then we just simply cover them up a little bit with some dry soil, and then they'll sprout up, and then we keep them hoed out. After the beans came up, we cultivated them about 4 times, which in a garden you would do with a hoe. And after the last pass with the cultivator, we went through it and we pulled up all these pigweeds that escaped our cultivator. The way we tell when we can plant a fall crop is we go to when the last frost date is, which around here is on the average about October 15th. So I know if I plant at the end of July, I have the 60 days it'll take to make the beans plus another couple of weeks that will allow us to have a good crop of beans. If it had gotten much later into August, I wouldn't have time to have planted this crop of beans. This variety is Taylor's dwarf horticultural bean. So we eat them as green beans when they're at this young stage, 5 to 6 inches long. And then in about 2 or 3 weeks, they'll ripen up. And all these pods will turn yellow with red streaks and they'll be leathery. That's when we harvest them and we shell them out to get what we call Shelley beans or October beans. These I take and put into bags and put in the freezer, and that's what we have during the winter time. You can also leave them on the vine to dry and then just have them as dry beans. We have found that they store better as dry beans just left on the vine, thrown up in the loft of the barn. One year I did that with some of them. I took some others on the porch, we shelled them out, I put them into jars, kept them inside, and they got buggy. So I think that they're actually better stored just outside where it's freezing and it's cold, and that way the bugs and stuff don't seem to get into them so bad. Gardening is full of joys and it's also full of disappointments. I always guarantee my customers that we will have a crop failure every year, but it'll be different from year to year. Some year it'll be tomatoes or beans or sweet corn, but there's always going to be bumper crops too. It all depends on the weather. We're going to have a really good crop of fall cabbages. These are Chinese cabbages and bok choys. And our fall beans have not been disappointing at all.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel, and like us on Facebook.